Jake Morrison stood in front of the mirror in his small cabin, trying to adjust his diplomatic uniform for the fifth time. His hands were shaking. He was 23 years old and had graduated from the academy only 3 months ago. Now he was about to meet actual aliens for the first time in his life. The door chimed. Captain Linda Hayes walked in without waiting for an answer. She looked at Jake with tired eyes. "I know this isn't what you expected, Morrison, but Gregory is in medical bay with some kind of flu. You're the only other person on this ship with diplomatic training." Jake swallowed hard. "Captain, I've only read about the Velrothi in textbooks. I've never actually done any real negotiation before." Linda put a hand on his shoulder. "None of us had experience until our first time. Just remember your training. Be polite. Don't make sudden movements. And for heaven's sake, don't show your teeth when you smile. They see that as a threat. Don't smile." "Got it." Jake took a deep breath. "When do they arrive?" "Their ship just entered orbit. They'll be docking in 20 minutes. Linda headed for the door, then paused. "Jake, the Velrothi are apex predators. They're big, they're strong, and they're used to being the most dangerous thing in any room. But we're not here to fight. We're here to talk. Just be yourself. Thanks for watching." After she left, Jake looked at himself in the mirror one more time. His brown hair was neatly combed. His uniform was straight. He looked like a kid playing dress-up. "Just be yourself," he muttered. "Sure. No problem." The docking bay was cold. Jake stood beside Captain Hayes and Commander Peter Grant, trying not to fidget. Behind them were 6 human security officers, standing at attention. The airlock hissed and began to open. The first thing Jake noticed was the smell. It was sharp and metallic, like lightning and stone. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps. The Velrothi emerged from the airlock, and Jake had to stop himself from stepping backward. They were huge. The smallest one was at least 7 feet tall. Their skin was covered in scales that shimmered between dark green and blue. Each one had sharp claws on their hands and feet. Their eyes were golden with slit pupils, like a predator's eyes. When they breathed, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. In the center walked Princess Sarah Lynn. She was slightly smaller than the warriors around her, but somehow more intimidating. She wore armor that looked both ceremonial and functional. Her scales were a deeper blue than the others, almost purple in the light. A crown of crystalline spikes rose from her head. Captain Hayes stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Highness, welcome aboard the Horizon's Edge. I am Captain Linda Hayes. This is Commander Peter Grant and diplomatic trainee Jake Morrison." The princess's golden eyes swept over them. Her gaze lingered on Jake for a moment, and he felt like a mouse being studied by a cat. Then, she looked away, as if he wasn't worth her attention. "Captain Hayes," the princess said. Her voice was deep and carried a slight hiss on certain sounds. "I am Princess Sarah Lynn of House Draven, daughter of Emperor Kirseth. These are my advisors, Commander Kale and Commander Jor." The 2 warriors behind her touched their fists to their chests. Jake noticed that each of them carried weapons that looked far more advanced than anything humans had. "We have prepared quarters for you and your party," Linda said. "And we've arranged a formal dinner to discuss the treaty negotiations." "Acceptable," the princess said. She began walking forward, and her entourage followed. As they passed Jake, one of the warriors bumped into him, almost knocking him down. The warrior didn't apologize or even look back. Jake steadied himself and followed the group. He was supposed to be part of this. He was supposed to help negotiate peace between humans and the Velrothi Empire. Right now, he just felt invisible. The formal dinner was held in the ship's largest conference room, which had been converted into a dining hall. The tables were arranged in a square, with humans on one side and Velrothi on the other. Jake sat at the far end of the human side, as far from the important people as possible. The food was a mix of human and Velrothi dishes. Jake watched nervously as the aliens ate. They used their claws to tear meat apart with casual strength. Every movement they made was powerful and deliberate. Commander Grant was trying to make conversation. "We hope this treaty will bring lasting peace between our peoples. The disputed territories can benefit both our civilizations." Princess Sarah Lynn tilted her head. "Commander, your people have been in space for barely 200 years. My people have ruled 100 star systems for 3,000 years. What can you offer us that we cannot simply take?" The room went quiet. Jake saw Captain Hayes tense up. This was the central problem. The Velrothi were stronger, more advanced, and had no reason to negotiate except that humanity had proven stubborn enough to be annoying. "Cooperation," Linda said carefully. "War is expensive. Peace is profitable. Perhaps." The princess took a drink from her cup. "We shall see." The dinner continued awkwardly. Jake tried to stay quiet and observe. He noticed little things about the Velrothi. The way they positioned themselves to always have exits in view. How their eyes constantly scanned for threats. The subtle way they communicated with each other through small gestures. Then he made his mistake. A human server brought out a dish of roasted vegetables. Without thinking, Jake stood up to help pass it down the table. In doing so, he turned his back on the princess. The room went silent. Every Velrothi at the table went completely still. Jake felt the temperature drop. Commander Kale stood up, one hand moving toward his weapon. "Disrespect," he hissed. Jake froze, holding the vegetable dish, suddenly realizing what he'd done. In Velrothi culture, turning your back on royalty was an insult. It implied they weren't a threat worth watching. Jake set down the dish carefully and turned to face the princess. His heart was pounding. "Your Highness, I apologize. I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just trying to help serve the food. I'm new to this, and I made a mistake." Princess Sarah Lynn stared at him with those golden eyes. Jake felt like prey. He knew he should look away, should show submission. But something in him refused to look weak, even though he was terrified. "You are the trainee," the princess said slowly. "The young one who has never met our kind before." "Yes, Your Highness. And you turned your back on me because you forgot I was dangerous." "No, Your Highness." Jake's voice was steady despite his fear. "I turned my back because I was focused on helping others. Where I come from, that's considered polite. I didn't think about how it would look to you. That was stupid of me, and I'm sorry." The princess studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she made a gesture with her hand. Commander Kale sat back down, though he continued to glare at Jake. "Apology accepted, trainee," she said. "But do not make such mistakes again. My patience has limits." "Understood, Your Highness." "Thank you." Jake sat down, his legs feeling weak. Captain Hayes gave him a look that said they would be having a long conversation later. Commander Grant looked sympathetic. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. But Jake could feel the princess's eyes on him several times, as if she was trying to figure something out. Later, when the Velrothi had been shown to their quarters, Captain Hayes pulled Jake aside. "That could have gone very badly," she said. "I know. I'm sorry, Captain. But your apology was good, honest, direct." She paused. The princess responded to that. "Maybe there's hope for these negotiations after all." "Captain, do you really think I should be part of this? I almost started an incident." Linda looked at him seriously. "Jake, diplomacy isn't about being perfect. It's about being genuine and finding ways to connect. You made a mistake, but you owned it. That's more valuable than you think." Jake nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. As he walked back to his cabin, he passed by a viewport showing the planet below. Somewhere down there, human colonists were depending on these negotiations to succeed. The alternative was war with an empire that had conquered 100 worlds. No pressure, he thought to himself. Just don't mess up again. 3 days had passed since the awkward dinner. Jake had spent most of that time reviewing files about the moon called Theta 7. It was a small, rocky moon, orbiting the gas giant in the system. Both humans and Velrathi claimed it had valuable minerals worth mining. The surveys would determine who had the better claim. Captain Hayes called Jake to her office early in the morning. When he arrived, he found Commander Grant and Princess Sarah Lynn already there. The princess looked at him with those golden eyes, and Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Morrison," Hayes said. "You're going to Theta 7 with the survey team." Jake blinked. "Me? Captain, I thought Gregory was handling that." "Gregory is still recovering, and you're the only other person on this ship who actually understands geological surveys. You wrote your academy thesis on mineral composition analysis." Princess Sarah Lynn made a sound that might have been a snort. "Captain Hayes, this mission is too important for an inexperienced trainee. I request someone more qualified." Linda crossed her arms. "With respect, Your Highness, Jake knows more about reading geological data than anyone else available. If we want accurate surveys, he's your best option." The princess's scales rippled in a way Jake was learning meant irritation. "Very well. But if he causes problems, the responsibility is yours." "Understood," Hayes said. She looked at Jake. "You leave in 2 hours. Pack light." The shuttle was small and cramped. Jake sat near the back with his equipment bag, trying not to get in anyone's way. Princess Sarah Lynn sat at the front with her 2 warriors, Kale and Jor. The human pilot, Chloe Webb, was young and confident, chatting easily with the Velrathi as if they weren't 7-foot-tall predators with claws and teeth. The human security officer, Danny Price, sat across from Jake. He was older, maybe 40, with scars on his hands and a calm demeanor. He leaned over and spoke quietly. "First time working this close with aliens?" Jake nodded. "Is it that obvious? You keep watching them like you expect them to attack." Danny smiled slightly. "They probably won't." "Probably. That's comforting. The princess is actually pretty reasonable for Velrathi royalty. I've read reports on some of the others. She at least tries to understand other species." Jake glanced at the princess. She was speaking with her warriors in their own language, a series of hisses and growls that sounded both beautiful and terrifying. As if sensing his gaze, she turned and looked directly at him. Jake quickly looked away, then mentally kicked himself. Looking away was showing weakness. He looked back and met her eyes, trying to appear calm and professional. The princess turned away first, returning to her conversation. 12-hour flight, Chloe called from the pilot's seat. "Might as well get comfortable." Jake tried to relax, but the confined space with 3 Velrathi made it difficult. He pulled out his datapad and reviewed the information about Theta 7 again. Barren surface. Thin atmosphere. Rich in rare minerals. Standard survey work. About 4 hours into the flight, Jake noticed Princess Sarah Lynn watching him. She stood and moved to sit across from him, her movements fluid despite her size. Danny shifted slightly, giving them space. "What are you reading, trainee?" she asked. "Survey data about Theta 7, Your Highness. Preparing for the mission." "You enjoy this work? Studying rocks and dirt?" Jake wasn't sure if she was mocking him. "I find it interesting." "Yes. Every planet and moon tells a story through its geology. You can learn about how it formed, what happened to it over millions of years, what resources it might have." The princess tilted her head slightly. "On Velrath, our homeworld, we have mountains that reach into the clouds. They are made of black stone that sings when the wind blows through it. Is that geology?" "Yes, Your Highness. The singing is probably caused by the wind passing through cracks and holes in the rock. Different minerals resonate at different frequencies." The princess was quiet for a moment. "Your people are strange. You come from a world with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Yet you survived and thrived. How?" Jake thought carefully about his answer. "We learned to use tools. We learn to work together. And we learn to outlast our problems. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest, but we're stubborn. Stubborn. The princess seemed to consider this. Yes. We have noticed that about humanity. You refuse to submit, even when you should. With respect, Your Highness, that's probably why you're negotiating with us instead of conquering us. Kale growled from his seat, but the princess held up a hand. Careful, Trainee. There is a line between honesty and insult. I apologize if I crossed it, Your Highness. The princess stood and returned to her seat. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Danny gave him a look that said, "Smooth move, genius." The rest of the flight passed quietly. Jake dozed off for a while, waking when Chloe announced they were approaching Theta 7. Through the window, Jake could see the moon coming into view. It was gray and pockmarked with craters. No vegetation, no water, just rock and dust under a thin atmosphere. Looks friendly, Danny muttered. They landed in a flat area between two large canyons. The shuttle touched down with a slight bump, and Chloe shut down the engines. Welcome to Theta 7. Current temperature is negative 20 Celsius. Air is breathable but thin. Don't run around unless you want to pass out. Everyone put on their environmental suits and helmets. The Velrothi didn't need as much protection as the humans. Their natural armor and physiology let them tolerate harsher conditions. The shuttle door opened, and they stepped out onto the moon's surface. Jake's boots crunched on the rocky ground. The sky above was a dark purple, with the gas giant dominating the horizon like a massive painting. Beautiful, Jake said softly. It is a rock, Kale said dismissively. Nothing more. Every rock has value to someone, Jake replied. He pulled out his scanning equipment and began taking readings. The group spread out to survey different areas. Princess Sarah Lynn stayed near Jake, watching him work. He tried to ignore her presence and focus on his instruments. The mineral content here is remarkable, Jake said, reading the data. There's a high concentration of duranium, some platinum, and... He paused, frowning. That's odd. What is odd? The princess asked. There's seismic activity. Not much, but it's there. This moon shouldn't have active geology. Is it dangerous? I don't know. It might be nothing, or it might mean there's something unstable below the surface. Jake checked the readings again. Your Highness, I think we should return to the shuttle and monitor this from a safe distance. Kale had walked over to listen. The trainee is frightened of a few vibrations in the ground. Velrothi have survived far worse conditions than this. End is night. I'm not frightened, Jake said. I'm being cautious. There's a difference. To a prey species, perhaps. Jake felt his temper flare but kept his voice calm. Commander Kale, I'm responsible for the scientific assessment of this moon. The data shows something unusual. I'm recommending we proceed carefully. We did not come all this way to run from shadows, Zor said, joining the conversation. We will explore the canyon system. You may return to the shuttle if you are afraid. Princess Sarah Lynn looked between Jake and her warriors. The trainee has given his assessment, but we will continue the survey. Stay alert. They walked toward the nearest canyon. Jake followed, checking his instruments constantly. The seismic activity was increasing slightly. Not enough to be immediately dangerous, but enough to make him nervous. The canyon was deep and narrow in places. The walls were striped with different colored rocks, showing layers of geological history. Jake took samples while the others explored ahead. Chloe stayed near him. You really think there's danger here? I think there's something happening below the surface that we don't understand yet. And I don't like surprises. A low rumble echoed through the canyon. Everyone stopped moving. What was that? Danny asked, his hand moving to his weapon. Before anyone could answer, the ground shook. Hard. Jake was thrown against the canyon wall. Rocks began falling from above. The rumbling grew louder, deeper, like the moon itself was groaning. Move! Princess Sarah Lynn shouted. Back to the shuttle, but it was too late. The canyon floor cracked open. A massive shape burst upward from the depths, sending rock and dust flying everywhere. Jake caught a glimpse of something huge and crystalline before the world turned into chaos. More of the canyon collapsed. Jake ran, sliding on loose rocks, trying to keep his footing. He saw Chloe fall and helped pull her up. Danny was firing his weapon at something Jake couldn't see through the dust. The Velrathi warriors were roaring, their weapons blazing with energy. Princess Sierra Lynn was shouting orders in her own language. Then Jake saw it clearly. The creature was massive, at least 30 feet long. Its body was covered in crystalline armor that glowed with inner light. It had multiple limbs and a head full of teeth, like spears. Energy crackled around it, arcing between its crystal plates. Theta Ravager. Jake breathed. He'd seen pictures of them in extinct species databases. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. The creature roared, a sound that made Jake's bones vibrate. It charged toward KL, moving impossibly fast for something so large. The canyon wall beside Jake collapsed. Rocks crashed down, separating him from the others. He heard the princess shout something. Then everything went dark, as dust filled the air. Jake coughed and tried to breathe through the dust. His helmet had cracked in the fall, but it was still working. Barely. He pushed rocks off his chest and stood up slowly, checking for injuries. His left arm hurt, but nothing seemed broken. The dust began to settle. Jake looked around and realized he was in a narrow crevice, separated from where the others had been. He could hear the Ravager somewhere nearby. Its roars echoing off the canyon walls. Energy weapons fired in the distance. "Hello?" he called into his communicator. "Anyone there?" Static. The minerals in the canyon walls must be blocking the signal. Jake was alone. No, not alone. He heard movement behind him and spun around. Princess Sarah Lynn emerged from behind a boulder, limping. Her armor was damaged, and her left arm was bleeding blue blood that looked almost black in the dim light. "Your Highness!" Jake moved toward her. "Are you hurt?" "It is nothing," she said, but her voice was tight with pain. "We must rejoin the others." Jake looked at her arm. The wound was deep, bleeding heavily. "Your Highness, that needs treatment now. You're losing blood. I have survived worse." "Maybe, but you're not going to survive if you bleed out in the next 10 minutes. Jake pulled off his outer jacket and tore it into strips. "Please, let me help." The princess stared at him for a moment, then sat down heavily. Jake knelt beside her and examined the wound. A sharp piece of rock had cut through her scales, which were tougher than any armor he'd ever seen. Whatever had hit her had hit hard. He wrapped the makeshift bandage around her arm and pulled it tight. The princess hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "You have done this before," she said. "My dad taught me first aid when I was a kid. We used to go hiking in the wilderness back on Earth. He said you should always know how to take care of injuries, because help isn't always nearby. Your father sounds wise. He was. He died 5 years ago." Jake finished securing the bandage and sat back. "That should slow the bleeding. But you need proper medical treatment." The Ravager roared again, closer this time. The ground vibrated with its footsteps. Princess Sarah Lynn tried to stand, but her injured leg gave out. Jake caught her before she fell. "We need to hide," he said. "Velrathi do not hide from prey. With respect, Your Highness, we're not the hunters right now. We're the prey, and prey survives by being smart, not brave." The princess looked like she wanted to argue, but another roar made the decision for them. Jake helped her move deeper into the crevice, where the space narrowed to barely wide enough for them to fit through. The Ravager was too large to follow them here. They squeezed through and found themselves in a small cave formed by collapsed rocks. It was dark, except for the glow from their helmet lights and the faint luminescence of the princess's blood on Jake's hands. "We are trapped," the princess said. "No, we're safe. For now." Jake pulled out his emergency pack and started going through it. Let me think. Think? We should be fighting our way back to the others. Fighting that thing is suicide. It's bigger than us, stronger than us, and covered in armor that our weapons barely scratch. Jake found his scanner and started checking their surroundings. But being trapped isn't the same as being helpless. The princess watched him work. You are calm. Most would panic in this situation. Panicking won't help us survive. My dad used to say that fear is fine. But panic gets you killed. Jake studied the scanner readings. The good news is there's a thermal vent nearby that's warming this cave. The bad news is we're cut off from the shuttle and everyone else. How long can we survive here? Jake checked his supplies. We have water for maybe 2 days. Air is not a problem because your helmet is intact. Mine is damaged but working. Food. He pulled out 2 emergency ration bars. We won't starve immediately. So we wait for rescue. Maybe. Or we find our own way out. Jake looked at the princess. How's your arm? She flexed it slowly. It hurts, but I can use it. Good. Because I'm going to need your help. Over the next few hours, Jake explained his plan. The Ravager was territorial and would be patrolling the canyon. But it was also wounded from the battle with Kale and Jor, which meant it would be cautious. They could use that. You want us to hunt it? The princess asked. Incredulous. Not hunt, track, learn its patterns, figure out its weaknesses. Jake showed her the scanner readings. See this? The creature is avoiding certain areas where this green mineral is common in the rocks. You think the mineral affects it? I think it's possible. The creature uses energy attacks. Maybe this mineral disrupts that somehow. Jake looked at her. I know you're hurt. I know I'm just a trainee, but we need to work together if we're going to survive this. The princess was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, On Velrath, we have a saying. The hunter, who underestimates prey, becomes prey. I have underestimated you, Trainee Jake Morrison. Jake is fine, Your Highness. Then you may call me Sarah. When we are alone. She stood slowly, testing her leg. Show me your plan. They emerged from the cave as night fell on Theta 7. The gas giant cast strange shadows across the canyon. Jake moved carefully, using the rocks for cover. Sarah followed, and he was impressed by how quietly she moved despite her size and injury. They found signs of the Ravager's passage, claw marks on rocks, scorched areas where it had discharged energy. Jake studied each one, building a picture in his mind of the creature's behavior. It's searching for us, he said quietly. But it's moving in a pattern. Circular. Like it's guarding territory. How do you know this? I grew up tracking animals. You learn to read the signs they leave behind. Jake pointed to a set of marks on the ground. See how these prints are deeper? It's favoring its right side. The left side is injured. Sarah looked at the tracks with new interest. You can tell all that from marks in the dirt? It's like reading a story. Everything leaves traces. Jake checked his scanner again. There's a large deposit of the green mineral, about half a kilometer east. If we can lead the Ravager there, we might have a chance. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's better than waiting here to die. They spent hours preparing. Jake fashioned simple tools from rocks and debris. A spear using a piece of metal from his equipment pack. A noisemaker from loose stones in a container. On-do. Loading down. A sling made from strips of his uniform. Sarah watched him work with curiosity. Your people truly are tool users. Everything becomes a weapon in your hands. Necessity is the mother of invention, Jake said. Humans aren't naturally dangerous. We had to learn to be dangerous. You are wrong, Sarah said. You are naturally dangerous. You simply do not look like it. Jake paused in his work. What do you mean? You are a persistence hunter. I have read about your species. On Earth, humans would chase prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. You cannot run as fast as many animals, but you can run longer than anything else. You never stop. You never give up. That is terrifying. Jake had never thought of it that way. I guess when you put it like that, we do sound pretty scary. You should embrace what you are, Sarah said. Predators recognize other predators, even if they do not look the part. Dawn came slowly to Theta 7. Jake and Sarah positioned themselves near the mineral deposit. Jake had set traps using loose rocks balanced on ledges, ready to fall with the right trigger. It wasn't much, but it was something. Remember, Jake said, I'll draw it in. You hit it from the side when it's distracted. Aim for the injured side. And if this fails, then at least we tried. Jake stepped out into the open and picked up his noisemaker. He shook it hard, the stones inside rattling loudly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground began to shake. The Ravager appeared at the far end of the canyon, its crystalline armor glowing in the early light. It saw Jake and roared. Jake's every instinct told him to run. But he stood his ground, raising his makeshift spear. The Ravager charged. At the last moment, Jake dove to the side. The creature crashed past him, and he triggered the first trap. Rocks tumbled down, striking the Ravager's injured side. It roared in pain and turned toward Jake, but then it stopped. The green minerals around it began to glow. The creature's energy crackled and misfired, arcing across its own body. It stumbled, confused and hurt. Sarah struck from the side, using a sharp piece of metal she'd found. She drove it into the gap in the creature's armor with all her strength. The Ravager screamed and thrashed. Jake ran forward and threw his spear. It wasn't a killing blow, but it added to the creature's pain and confusion. The Ravager turned and fled back into the depths, bleeding and injured. Silence fell over the canyon. Jake and Sarah stood breathing hard, staring at each other. We did it, Jake said. We survived, Sarah corrected. That is what matters. Voices called from nearby. Kale and Jor appeared with Chloe and Danny. They stopped and stared at the scene before them. The damaged Ravager tracks. The blood. Jake and Sarah standing together, both injured but alive. Kale touched his fist to his chest, the Velrathi sign of respect. Jor did the same. You fought well, Trainee, Kale said. The shuttle's medical bay was small, but it had everything needed for basic treatment. Chloe worked on bandaging Jake's cuts, while Danny checked his cracked helmet. Across the bay, Jor was treating Princess Sarah's arm with proper medical supplies. You're lucky, Chloe said, applying antiseptic to a cut on Jake's forehead. Most people don't survive their first encounter with a Theta Ravager. I read that they were extinct, Jake said, wincing as she worked. So did everyone else. Guess we were wrong. Danny held up Jake's damaged helmet. This is trash. You'll need a new one before we head back to the ship. KL approached Jake, his golden eyes studying the young human carefully. The princess told me what happened. You protected her, treated her wounds, devised a strategy to defeat the Ravager. We worked together, Jake said. I couldn't have done it alone. Humility is a prey trait, Kale said, but there was respect in his voice. Yet you stood your ground when the Ravager charged. That is not prey behavior. Os be commentessis. Jake didn't know what to say to that. He looked over at Sarah, who was watching the conversation, while Jor finished wrapping her arm in proper bandages. The flight back to the horizon's edge took 12 hours. Jake spent most of it sleeping, exhausted from the ordeal. When he woke, he found Sarah sitting across from him, her golden eyes thoughtful. You should still be resting, she said. So should you. Jake stretched carefully, his muscles sore. How's your arm? Healing. Velrathi recover quickly. She paused. I have been thinking about what happened. About you. What about me? You did not panic. You did not freeze. You assessed the situation and took action. Sarah leaned forward. That is not normal for someone your age with no real experience. Jake shrugged. I just did what needed to be done. No. You did more than that. Sarah's voice was intense. You hunted a creature that my warriors could not defeat in direct combat. You used the terrain. You studied its behavior. You found its weakness. These are not the actions of a trainee diplomat. I'm really not that special, Jake said uncomfortably. Any human would have done the same. Any human? Sarah repeated. Interesting. Because I have been researching your species. Did you know that humans are classified as apex predators on Earth? Jake blinked. I mean, technically, yes, but we're not like you. We don't have claws or armor or natural weapons. You have something better. You have endurance. You have the ability to track and predict behavior. You have tool use. Sarah counted on her clawed fingers. Humans can run for days without stopping. You sweat to cool yourselves, which most species cannot do. Your eyes are positioned for tracking movement. Your hands can manipulate objects with incredible precision. Where are you going with this? On Earth, you hunted animals larger and stronger than yourselves. You chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. You used weapons and traps and fire. You learned to make everything else on your planet afraid of you. Sarah's eyes were intense. You are not prey, Jake Morrison. You never were. Jake was quiet for a moment. Maybe you're right. But humans decided a long time ago that we didn't want to be defined by being predators. We wanted to be more than that. Why? Because being a predator means always looking for threats, always competing, always dominating. Jake met her eyes. Humans learned that the hard way. We fought each other for thousands of years. When we finally unified, we decided to try something different. We wanted to be partners with other species, not conquerors. Sarah considered this. So, you hide what you are, not hide. Choose not to emphasize it. There's a difference. Jake smiled slightly. You thought I was weak because I'm young and inexperienced. You were partly right. But you also assumed humans were soft because we don't look dangerous. That was wrong. Yes, Sarah admitted. It was. The rest of the flight passed in thoughtful silence. When they arrived at the horizon's edge, Captain Hayes was waiting in the docking bay with medical teams. She looked relieved when everyone emerged from the shuttle alive. Debriefing in 2 hours, she said. Everyone get checked by medical first. The debriefing was held in the main conference room. Jake sat between Danny and Chloe, feeling out of place. Captain Hayes and Commander Grant were there, along with Princess Sarah and her advisors. Let's start from the beginning, Hayes said. What happened on Theta 7? Kale gave the report from the Velrothi perspective. He described the seismic activity, the appearance of the Ravager, and the battle. Then he described how Jake and Sarah had been separated and presumed lost. But they survived, Kale said. And they defeated the creature that my brother and I could not. The trainee showed courage and skill beyond his years. Grant looked at Jake. Is that accurate, Morrison? We got lucky, sir, Jake said. The creature was wounded, and we found a weakness it had to certain minerals. We used that advantage. Lucky, Sarah said, her voice sharp. You tracked the creature. You studied its behavior. You devised a strategy. That is not luck. That is skill. Hayes looked between them. Princess, you seem to have changed your opinion of my trainee. I underestimated him. Sarah said simply. I thought him weak because he is young and lacks combat experience. I was wrong. He is a survivor, a hunter, like his entire species. End quote. The room went quiet. Grant looked at Jake with new interest. Explain. Jake stood, feeling uncomfortable with all the attention. Captain, Commander, I think what the princess is saying is that humans have certain traits that we don't always advertise. We evolved as persistence hunters. We're good at tracking, planning, and outlasting problems. That's what I did on Theta 7. And you roared at the creature, Sierra added. Tell them about that. I did what? Jake looked confused. When the Ravager charged, you made a sound. A challenge. It made the creature hesitate, Jake thought back. He barely remembered that moment, too focused on survival. I guess I yelled at it. I was trying to make myself look bigger, more threatening. It worked, Jor said. For a moment, the Ravager was unsure. It saw you as a threat, not prey. Hayes leaned back in her chair. Well, this is an interesting development. It changes things, Sierra said. She looked at Hayes directly. Captain, I must speak to my father, the Emperor. This mission has taught me something important about humanity. What's that? That you are far more dangerous than you appear. And that is why we should negotiate with you, rather than fight you. Grant raised an eyebrow. You're saying a trainee diplomat surviving on a hostile moon has convinced you to support the peace treaty? I am saying that if a trainee can survive what my best warriors struggled with, then fighting your species would be costly. Sierra stood. Humans do not look dangerous. You appear soft, vulnerable. But that is deceptive. You are persistent. You adapt. You find ways to win, even when outmatched. She turned to Jake. You asked me on the shuttle why humans choose not to emphasize being predators. I understand now. You want other species to judge you by your actions, not your appearance. You want to be underestimated, so when you reveal your true capability, it has more impact. Jake hadn't thought about it that way. But he couldn't deny there was truth in it. Maybe, Your Highness. Please, Sierra said. When we are in private, or among friends, you may call me Sarah. You have earned that right. KL and Zor both nodded in agreement, their fists touching their chests in the gesture of respect. Hayes cleared her throat. Well, then, I think this mission was more successful than we anticipated. Not only did we complete the survey, but we've apparently demonstrated humanity's value as allies. Indeed, Sierra said. I will recommend to my father that we proceed with the treaty negotiations. The moon can be jointly managed. There is enough resources for both our peoples. That's excellent news, Grant said. He looked at Jake. Morrison, it seems you've accidentally become quite the diplomat. Jake felt his face heat up. I was just trying to survive, sir. Sometimes that's all diplomacy is, Hayes said with a smile. Surviving long enough to understand each other. After the debriefing, Jake was walking back to his cabin when Sarah caught up with him. She moved quietly for someone so large. Jake, she said, I wanted to thank you for saving my life. You saved mine too. We helped each other. Yes. But you treated me as an equal, even though I am royalty, and you are a trainee, even though my species is stronger than yours. Sarah's golden eyes were thoughtful. That is rare. Most species either bow to us or challenge us. You did neither. You simply worked with me to solve a problem. That's what partners do. Yes. Sarah smiled, careful not to show too many teeth. I am glad we are becoming partners, both personally and politically. Me too, Jake said honestly. Sarah nodded and walked away. Jake continued to his cabin, exhausted but feeling like something important had changed. He'd gone to Theta 7 as a trainee diplomat that no one respected. He was returning as someone who had earned the respect of Velrathi warriors and their princess. Not bad for his first real mission. Word spread quickly through both ships. The story of the trainee, diplomat, and the princess surviving on Theta 7 became the talk of every mess hall and corridor. Jake found himself getting respectful nods from crew members who had barely noticed him before. Even the Velrathi guards who had dismissed him now acknowledged his presence. It made him uncomfortable. You're famous, Chloe said, sitting down across from him in the cafeteria. The princess has been telling everyone about your tracking skills and how you saved her life. We saved each other, Jake said for what felt like the 100th time. It wasn't just me. That's not how she tells it, Chloe grinned. You should hear the Velrothi version. According to KL, you tracked the Ravager like an ancient hunter, then roared at it so fiercely it actually retreated. That's not what happened. Doesn't matter. That's the story now. Chloe leaned forward. Jake, do you realize what this means? The Velrothi respect strength above everything. You showed them that humans have strength they didn't expect. That changes how they see all of us. Jake thought about that. Maybe that was the point. Maybe Sierra was emphasizing his actions, not just to honor him, but to change how her people viewed humanity. 3 days later, Captain Hayes called Jake to her office. When he arrived, he found Commander Grant there too, along with several screens showing diagrams of the treaty negotiations. Morrison, sit down, Hayes said. We have a situation. Jake sat, nervous. What kind of situation, Captain? The good kind, surprisingly. Grant brought up one of the screens. Princess Sarah has sent a formal message to her father, Emperor Kir Seth. She's recommended not only that the treaty move forward, but that you be promoted to full diplomatic status and included in all major negotiations. Jake's mouth fell open. She wants me in the negotiations? Captain, I barely know what I'm doing. According to the princess, that's exactly why you should be there. Hayes read from a message on her screen. She writes, Jake Morrison represents the best of humanity. He is honest, capable, and sees beyond surface appearances. If our peoples are to build lasting peace, we need voices like his at the table. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Grant said. This is an incredible opportunity, Jake. The Velrothi Empire controls 100 systems. Getting them to see humans as equals instead of annoyances is huge for our future in this sector. But I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than you think, Hayes said gently. You did something no textbook could teach you. You connected with an alien princess on a personal level. You showed her that humans are worth respecting. That's the heart of diplomacy. Jake took a deep breath. What do I need to do? First, meet with Princess Sarah. She requested to speak with you privately. Hayes stood. Use conference room 3. It's been cleared for your meeting. Jake walked to conference room 3, his heart pounding. The door slid open, and he found Sarah standing by the window, looking out at the stars. She turned when he entered. Jake, she said. Of course, Your Highness. I mean Sarah. Jake stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. Captain Hayes said you wanted to speak with me. Yes. I wanted to explain something before the negotiations begin. Sarah gestured to the chairs, and they both sat. Do you understand what I am trying to do? I think so. You're trying to change how your people see humans. Correct. But it is more than that. Sarah leaned forward. Jake, my people are warriors. We respect strength, courage, and combat ability. For 3,000 years, we have been the apex predators of this region of space. We conquer worlds. We dominate other species. It is our way. I understand. But then we encountered humanity. You have been in space for barely 2 centuries. Yet you resist us. You establish colonies in systems we claim. You negotiate instead of submitting. It confuses my people. They see you as weak creatures who refuse to accept your place. Jake nodded slowly. And you want to show them we're not weak. I want to show them that strength comes in many forms. Sarah's golden eyes were intense. On Theta 7, I saw what humans really are. You are not weak. You are patient. You are clever. You find solutions where we see only problems. You survive situations that would kill many species. We're stubborn, Jake said with a slight smile. Yes, stubborn, persistent, adaptable. Sarah smiled back, carefully hiding her teeth. These are predator traits, Jake. But they are not obvious predator traits. You do not roar and charge like we do. You watch. You wait. You strike when the moment is right. That is terrifying. In a different way. So you want the Velrothi to be afraid of humans? No. I want them to respect humans. To see you as equals. Sira stood and walked to the window. My father is old and traditional. He believes the Velrothi way is the only way. But I have seen other worlds, met other species. I believe there is room for different kinds of strength in the galaxy. Jake joined her at the window. What do you need from me? Be yourself. Show my people what I saw on that moon. Show them that a young, inexperienced human can survive what challenges our best warriors. Sira looked at him. I know this is a burden. You did not ask to become a symbol. But that is what you are now. The human who earned Velrothi respect. No pressure, Jake said, trying to make light of it. Sara laughed. A sound like rocks sliding. Pressure creates diamonds, as you humans say. I believe you can handle this. The formal treaty negotiations began the next day. The conference room was large, with a long table separating human and Velrothi delegations. Jake sat next to Captain Hayes, across from Princess Sira and her advisors. At the head of the table, on a massive screen, Emperor Kirseth watched from his throne room, light years away. The Emperor was even more intimidating than his daughter. His scales were dark blue, almost black, and scarred from countless battles. His crown was made of metal and bone. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like thunder. Humans, he said. My daughter has told me interesting things about you. She says you are more than you appear. Captain Hayes stood. Your Majesty, humanity seeks peaceful cooperation with the Velrothi Empire. We believe both our peoples can benefit from mutual respect and shared resources. Respect must be earned, the Emperor said. Why should the Velrothi respect a species that has no claws, no armor, no natural weapons? Before Hayes could answer, Jake stood. He didn't plan it. The words just came out. Because we don't need them, Your Majesty. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Jake. He felt his face heat up, but continued. Humans evolved differently than Velrothi. We're not stronger or faster, but we're persistent. When our prey ran, we followed. When predators attacked, we outsmarted them. When the environment tried to kill us, we adapted. Jake met the Emperor's eyes on the screen. Your Majesty, humans survived the Ice Age. We survived diseases that killed millions. We survived wars that lasted generations. We survived because we never give up. The Emperor leaned forward. Pretty words. But what does that mean in practice? It means that if the Velrothi Empire goes to war with humanity, we won't fight you the way you expect. We won't meet you in open battle where you're strongest. We'll use guerrilla tactics. We'll make every planet you try to take cost more than it's worth. We'll never surrender, never stop resisting, never give you peace. Jake paused. Or we can negotiate. We can share resources and knowledge. We can be partners instead of enemies. That choice is yours. Sarah was smiling. Kyle and Jor both had their fists pressed to their chests. Even Commander Grant looked impressed. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then, he laughed. A booming sound that made the speakers crackle. My daughter was right about you, young human. You have the spirit of a warrior, even if you do not look like one. The Emperor stood from his throne. Very well. I accept your argument. The Velrothi Empire will negotiate this treaty in good faith. But know this, we will be watching humanity. If you prove to be enemies, we will respond accordingly. And if we prove to be friends, Jake asked, then perhaps you will teach us something new. The Emperor gestured to Sarah. My daughter will handle the details. I expect regular reports. The screen went dark. Everyone in the room let out a collective breath. Captain Hayes turned to Jake. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen a trainee do. Probably both, Captain, Jake admitted. The negotiations continued for 2 more weeks. Jake sat in on every session, contributing when he had insight, staying quiet when others knew better. He watched as 2 very different species worked out how to share space and resources without going to war. It wasn't easy. There were arguments. There were moments when both sides almost walked away. But eventually, an agreement was reached. The disputed territories would be jointly managed. Trade routes would be established. Cultural exchanges would be organized. On the final day, as both delegations signed the treaty documents, Princess Sira approached Jake. "This would not have happened without you," she said quietly. "I barely did anything. You did everything that mattered. You showed my father that humans deserve respect. You showed my people that strength comes in many forms." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her claws careful not to pierce his uniform. "You made us see beyond our prejudices. You did the same for us," Jake said. "Before this mission, most humans saw Velrathi as aggressive conquerors. Now, we see you as people we can work with. Then we have both learned something valuable." Sira stepped back and performed the Velrathi salute, fist to chest. "Until we meet again, Jake Morrison." "I hope that will be soon." "Me too, Sira." That evening, Jake stood in the observation deck, watching the Velrathi flagship prepare to depart. Chloe and Danny joined him. "So," Danny said, "how does it feel to be a hero?" "I'm not a hero. I was just in the right place, at the right time. That's what all heroes say," Chloe said. "Face it, Jake. You changed history. A month ago, humans and Velrathi were on the edge of war. Now we have a peace treaty. That's because of you. It's because we all worked together. Sure. Keep being humble. It's working for you." Danny clapped him on the shoulder. "But seriously, kid, you did good." After they left, Jake remained at the window. He thought about everything that had happened. A month ago, he was a nervous trainee who could barely talk to aliens. Now, he was a full diplomat who had helped negotiate peace with an empire. The universe was strange and wonderful and terrifying. But Jake was beginning to think he might have a place in it after all. Captain Hayes's voice came over his communicator. "Morrison, report to my office." Jake walked to the captain's office, wondering what was next. Hayes was at her desk with Commander Grant. "Sir? Captain?" "Sit down, Jake." Hayes waited until he sat. "We've received orders from Earth. The diplomatic corps wants you back at the academy." Jake's heart sank. "For advanced training," Grant said with a smile. "They want to accelerate your program. After this mission, you've proven you can handle complex negotiations. They want to give you the tools to do even more. But also," Hayes added, "they're giving you a choice. You can return to Earth for training, or you can stay here as my assistant diplomatic officer. You'd continue learning, but in the field instead of classrooms." Jake looked between them. "What do you think I should do?" "That's your decision," Hayes said. "But I'll tell you this, you're a natural at this work. You see people, not just species. That's rare and valuable." Jake thought about it. Returning to Earth meant safety, structure, and proper training. Staying meant uncertainty, challenges, and learning by doing. He thought about Sira saying he was stubborn, about his father teaching him to survive, about standing up to the Emperor and earning respect through honesty instead of deception. "I want to stay," Jake said. "There's still a lot I need to learn, but I learn better by doing." Hayes smiled. "Good. Because we have a meeting with the Centauri Coalition next month, and they specifically requested you." "Me? Why?" "Word travels fast in diplomatic circles. Everyone wants to meet the human trainee who impressed the Velrathi princess." Grant stood. "Welcome to the big leagues, Morrison. Try not to start any wars." Jake left the office with his head spinning. His life had changed so much in just a few weeks. He was no longer just a trainee that people dismissed. He was a diplomat that people respected. But more importantly, he had learned something about himself and humanity. They didn't need to be the strongest or the most advanced. They just needed to be themselves, persistent, adaptable, and willing to see others as equals. That was enough. That was more than enough. As Jake walked back to his cabin, he passed a Velrothi warrior in the corridor. The warrior stopped and pressed his fist to his chest in salute. Jake returned the gesture. The universe was full of apex predators. But sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one no one saw coming. Jake smiled to himself and continued walking. He had work to do,